Pardon, we have some technical difficulties, but I'm here. So we're going to discuss today a lot of new things. We're going to have amazing guests. I would kindly ask you to be very attentive during the first panel because we're going to receive any compliments, any amendments, and we're going to talk about the safety, occupational safety and health. And I invite you all for a discussion after the first panel, and please participate with all the participants during this. We still receive new guests and we slowly start. I will pass the word to Sahi. Can you hear me? Good day. I'm very glad to see all of you. And I'm very happy to see so many participants on this forum today. I'm very glad to participate also to our meeting. The goal of our meeting is to discuss a new law on the health and safety of the employees. We can also participate in amendments to a new law. These changes can have a long history, especially when we talk about the big companies, enterprises that were facing differences between the law, our Ukrainian national law, and the foreign. So other companies like Naftogaz, they understood that changes are vital, and to work by means of the old methods is impossible. This gave a new boost to the new rules and new specialists that would like to live by new rules, using new methods, to use the platforms for sharing experience and for legal assistance and support. The most famous association is European Association of Labor, and their organization became the new promoter of the new methods and the new level of studying for the specialists they promote. And we discussed the new standards in law and new standards of work. We also would like to talk about our magazine, Health and Safety Occupational, with Ms. Alexandra, where we create a new platforms for discussion for the labor safety. And we share the experience we would like to talk about the Confederation of the Employers of Ukraine that also participate in this process. They created the new standards, like also new creation of new standards that were the foreign associations were participated in. And a lot of people, like employers, by means of board of directors, they also would participate in this new process of changes. Representatives from Ministry of Healthcare, Ministry of Economic and Trade, trade unions, that together worked on the new points of the law. And also Antonio Santos, who created and started a new standards and showed it to Ukraine to start the online marathons and master classes and workshops. And this is all to orient our mindset to the new standards. Also, we cooperate with the government agencies that also would like to participate in this process of creating new standards. So we support the improvement, and we would like for our employees to work in any conditions. And I wish a good luck to all of us. Let's start work, dear colleagues, dear guests. We would like also to admit that during this forum, we will have a short quiz, and the goal of it is to show the new methods, approaches for studying. We would introduce a couple of pictures that you would need to find some certain risks on that. The links for the quiz you will see in the chat window, and you can use this format and conduct such activities at your enterprises. I invite all of you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Sergey Ivanovich. I would also like to admit that in the chat, you would see the discount for prescription of our magazine, so please track this. I would like to start our first part of legislative panel. The key word I would like to give to our speaker, Yuri Kuzovi. Thank you, Alexandra, and I would have a rational offer. This discount for prescription of the magazine, please introduce this at 1700, and this will definitely work. I'm very glad to see all of you. I'm very happy to see such a great professional audience here. I'm a little bit nervous because I've never spoke to such a big audience. But besides the words of gratitude, considering these conditions that we're a little bit limited, but anyway, I can participate in such a forum with the great participants and specialists from all Ukraine and not only Ukraine. And I hope that this possibility will be used to improve the process that is going on. And the process I would like to tell you a little bit more about. I have a simple, but at the same time, very complex task, because I would like to bring up the points that are happening right now in the legislative field. But before I start, I would like to rephrase a little bit the words of one of the classics. I can call him a classic. That was saying, he was saying, he took the helmet and he was saying, comrades, the revolution that was spoken so long finally happened. I can easily say that this revolution actually happened, but unfortunately, today we're still on a stage when we're still in the process of legislative changes, labor legislation, and the results and efficiency of such changes, revolutionary changes, will definitely depend on all of us, on our activity and rationality that we would participate in the process. That's why I would be very happy by continuing the offer of Ms. Alexandra to be very active during this discussion. And the project of law, I hope you all have seen this, and I encourage you to start discussion and work on that. I think that's the best platform to find the rational piece in all the legislation. About the drastic changes, because Mr. Sergey spoke about this a little bit, I'm saying that these are like super vitally important, and I think that no one has any doubts. To my mind, the key problem that needs regulation in this sphere is the inefficiency of the government approach in management of this system. And the need of this reform is caused by today's management. I'm speaking about all levels of management. It's still functioning by the reactive principle that is based on the correction methods or actions. They are brought after the such certain accidents, and this reaction to certain incidents is very old. The method is absolutely not on time in consideration of creation of safe conditions. Impact on the employers is still based on the criminal personal responsibilities created by the law. This is the paradigm of motivation that Mr. Sergey spoke earlier. At the same time, international practices, they say that the employer should be a little bit more self-motivated in use of principle of health and safety, and at the same time more motivative material responsibility for the quality of such a choice on a certain occupation place or anywhere on the enterprise. This changes finally are coming. At the same time, we have another negative experience in this field. The main sense of it that we accumulated the huge volume of old, ineffective legislation, acts, and standards, and they don't meet the real standards, and they have a really formal vision, because actually they can bring the employer to the criminal responsibility, but at the same time they do not encourage the employee to create the certain safety environment. So this change also needs to happen on the legislative level. So the employers should create their own methods, but at the same time they use the most of their resources to survive in the conditions that government created. But at the same time, formally, the government gives the opportunity to avoid responsibilities for any incidents. So for example, I've done everything that the government says, and that's it. I've done everything for the health and safety on my enterprise. So that's something that should change. And this is one of the motivators that gives us a chance to talk about the changes of the system in general. So in frames of conception, we developed a project, a draft, and we would need to say that this process is very time consuming, and nothing would happen without the help of our colleagues from the International Association, Social Safety Association. And the process is on the stage where we're discussing, and it wouldn't happen without the assistance of our foreign colleagues. And how productive we were, I hope we would have a chance to discuss after the session. So for what this process is developed, because we would like to develop a new process of avoiding the risks, occupational risks. The key task for this project, legislative project and draft, is implementation of Directive 89/138 by the draft of this law, we would like to implement the new system of avoiding the occupational risks. So in these principles are defined by the directive and the avoidance of risks, assessment of risks, so determining the sources of risks, adaptation of the equipment to certain employee, adaptation to the technical progress that the employer should work on. So changing the equipment to less dangerous, using collective activities and giving the priority to this, and also a proper learning process and training process. So this is something that should be in this considering the system that is based on the reactive methods of reaction. So the introduced methods, they foresee the health and safety of the employees by means of the precaution measures. And if we talk about the certain points and the general rules, we won't be able to talk about the addition, but anyway, I would like to inform you about the key and principal things that are included in the project. And to my mind, one of the key points is the change of the object that this new government politic is given to. So bringing this up to the European, let's say, level, where we are considered about the safety of the employee, not the work, not the mechanism. The result is the safety of the employee to his health, and changing of this paradigm of orientation of the government politics and the system of regulation. To my mind, it's one of the key ideological changes. And based on this change, all the other norms and the conditions change their idea and their mechanism of influence, and the result. The key task for the politics is to the key is the demand to the efficiency of this result to minimize and avoid any risks to the employee. And this is the key. It should be in the base of all the legislation, acts, and further laws, and any other standards that should be developed by the employer later. So this should be defined on the government level, the key terms. And the topic of the last discussion of the last working group, it confirmed the necessity for such a definition of these terms on a governmental level, because sometimes the difference in terms and understanding of the same object or activity or the procedure, it brings up a confusion and collision in the legislation. That's why this draft of law, first of all, defines terms. So the term of employee, the risks, the working conditions, and any hazard factors, and other terms. There are plenty of them. 3 pages, as far as I remember. And very important direction of the changes in law was also the mechanism of investigation of accidents. To my mind, the project has certain norms for this procedure, and also for employer to track all the incidents, to record them, and to inform properly. And for these purposes, we have also the definition of the term accident, because as far as we know, as per today, even a minor incidents that are not recorded and are not investigated. And this is bad because the lack of such an analysis also brings that, by consideration of the specialist, the employer is missing those indicators that are witnessing that on this working spot, on this occupational place, such things may happen in future. That's why this is foreseen in the new draft of law. Also, one of the key elements of the changes is the change of motivation of employer to perform and implement the correct, proper measures of health and safety on. And these changes were discussed at the end of our last discussion on the working group that we had. These norms probably they brought up the most controversial ideas and thoughts and discussion, because on one hand, everyone understands that there has to be a correct motivation for providing safety, but the other thing is the process of this motivation, creating this motivation, they need certain measures and approaches to be taken, because we do understand that it's quite easy to use the high penalties, for example, or any other administrative actions. And by this means, the employer would be out of business. So the proposals in the project is also to the material compensation if the measures taken were not enough. So the court should define if the actions taken by the employer were effective, and if there is a guilt of the employer during the incident. And the other thing in this, the avoiding of breaching the rule of health and safety, occupational health and safety by the employer. So the new edition brings up the great definition of these new norms, of the new penalties, punishments and implementing this into the system of material responsibility. Next thing is the mandatory insurance to be indicated in the contracts. And also by insuring any risks and any possible things is also one of the layers of the changes, and a certain mechanism is introduced to be used during the occupations that have high risk or equipment with high professional risk. In one case, we need the certain regulations and this certain permissions to use the equipment and the elements. And on the other hand, the insurance from the risks during such works or jobs, there could be additional alternative mechanisms for providing safety, because the insurance companies that provide such an insurance, they will fulfill the role of effective auditor or controller, let's say, for the safety performance of such works. I'll quickly go through the key points that I consider to be important. These are considerations on necessities of providing security and health, and also the employees that recently gave birth or have small children, infants at home, about the material, maternity leaves, and also to the genetic heritage. So to this certain category of the employees, we also say about those who are still under 18. And we have a certain block that provide health and safety during their work. So the other important thing is also to, on the legislation level, is to receive the proper education. And to the certain, and these are the foreseens that all the training programs, all the studies, they consider that the certain level of education and knowledge should be received. Also, very important part is that brought a lot of discussion is the offers through the regulation on the legislation level, the central legislative body and control constant complaint, or let's say attention of our foreign partners from ISSA was brought to the point that the limitation and regulations for the inspection that are currently existing in our country, they don't meet the practices and the norms defined by the international legislation. It was also additional motivator for this law to define on the legislative level, because you know that the procedures are also brought in and reflected in the law. That's why we tried to bring the competencies on the legislative level. So resuming, the key goal was to implement Directive of 391 that will encourage to bring our legislation as close as possible to European. That is our goal. And on the other hand, also will increase the level of responsibility of employer for creation of proper conditions. Implementing mechanisms for improving health and safety. improving the competition level. We also brought this up because sometimes the corporate regulations or the foreign contractors are absolutely different from the national standards that are set by the national legislation. And also implementing the norms of the European legislation to our national. As far as you all know, we had the working group in October, and we had a chance to witness and discuss it, that this forum is more effective, efficient, because during the live discussion, if we have enough time, we have a chance to discuss certain realms. And I hope that in addition to this process that was performed by our International Association of Labor, we can still continue this discussion today. And we hope that there will be questions that I can answer. If I wouldn't be able to answer, I will answer to them later. But in this case, I'm very interested about your thoughts and what you think about this and the offers that are brought up and included into the new draft of law. And I hope that this platform will not end up with this discussion, but with future ones. And I think there will be chats and other pages or links where we can continue the discussion to finish and accomplish this process efficiently. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you the best of luck during your work.
Thank you, Yuri, for your speech, for this feedback, and we would also like to hear other specialists. They will give their suggestions, and they will also be given in written form. I would like to add several words, please.
Can I take a couple of words?
I would like to support Yuri in his speech. So the documents we are suggesting for consideration is not the improved old draft law, but it's totally new law, newly developed law, and we used new standards and norms there. These are requirements for using occupational equipment, for protecting safety, occupational safety measures, and also this genetic inheritance that was mentioned. It's a totally new thing that was never included into the previous law.
Sorry, guys.
Yes, wanted to.
Hello.
You work in one time, two people.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, pardon.
Как-нибудь там определитесь, просто кто по очереди, кто переводит. Спасибо большое.
You need to translate, будь ласка.
I would like to give the floor to Mr. Antonio Santos, international expert and UILO project manager. And I would like to remind you once again about the technical features of this meeting. If you need a translation into Ukrainian, please change the English into Russian. So please, Mr. Antonio Santos, welcome. We are very grateful that you joined our meeting today. And we are very happy and proud of this partnership. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Добър ден всім. In my own name and on behalf of the International Labour Organization, Международная организация Праці, I would like to congratulate the organizers of this webinar, Охорона праці і пожежна безпека, for the opportunity of this webinar. Especially in the context in which this very important draft law on occupational safety and health is being drafted. I will only focus on 2 points I can then share the presentation with you. I will focus on the positive aspects of this draft law for one side, and things that in our mind, in the opinion of the EU ILO project, should be improved. First of all, I would say that, and regarding the positive aspects, the most important of them is the one that was mentioned by Yuri Kuzovoy, which is the change on the mindset of the policy decision makers, workers, and employers of Ukraine. And this openness is critical so that this law can make its path. And I believe that there are conditions to do so. Because let me remind you that Ukraine has an incidence rate of fatal work-related accidents, which is the triple of the average incidence rate of fatal work-related accidents in EU, 3 times more. And we are just talking about the fatal ones. We are not even talking about occupational diseases and serious work-related accidents that did not lead to death. And ILO defends that, and it's true that work-related accidents and occupational diseases kill more people than wars, and that is particularly true in Ukraine. So I think Ukraine cannot postpone addressing this issue. You cannot have the luxury of letting your people die at work. You don't have that luxury. No one should have it. The second positive aspect is the way this process of drafting laws was conducted, and my congratulations to Yuri Kuzovoy again, and for the Minister of Economy for the initiative and leadership of the project, and especially for the involvement on the drafting process of everybody that had relevant inputs to give to it through a work group that was set up by the minister. And I'm talking about the social partners, trade unions and employers, organizations, representatives of the OSH experts through ESOSH, other ministers and authorities. I'm remembering the Minister of Health, for example, besides the Minister of Economy, the Institute of Occupational Medicine, etc. And also ILO was invited to provide technical assistance and technical advice and recommendations. We did it through 2 sets of recommendations. The first one was sent even before the work retreat in Chernihiv, where we addressed the draft law proposed by the Minister of Economy, and then we also prepared already comments to this last consolidated version. They are made in English, they are being translated into Ukrainian, and as soon as they are translated into Ukrainian, they will be sent to the work group members. Another positive aspect, and now I'm focusing clearly on the draft itself, is first of all the definition of a national policy and system for OSH, which is covered by Articles 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 of the draft. It is very important because these provisions set up the architecture of OSH in Ukraine, and they allow Ukraine to align with, to pave the way for the future ratification of ILO Convention number 187 on the framework for OSH. Also, and a very important aspect, I would say even probably the most important aspect, is foreseeing the obligation of the employer to continually ensuring the safety and health of the workers in all aspects of the work, which is foreseen on Article 26(1) of the draft law, and is a precondition, probably the most important one, to align the national legislation on OSH with the European Union OSH Framework Directive, which is a Directive 89/391. as foreseen on the association agreement, by the way. Another very positive aspect of this draft law is the holistic approach, which includes both health and safety, not just health for one side, hygiene for another side, and safety for another side. So it is very important, this holistic approach that is present on this draft law, not just focus on safety. Another very important aspect, and it was already mentioned by Yuri Kuzovoy, has to do with the philosophy and with the nature of the approach. And this draft law is based not, as it happens with our law on labor protection, as the name indicates, because your law on labor protection is about labor protection, and this new law is not about protection, is not about a logic of protection, correction, reaction, and compensation. It means it's not a downstream approach. This law is not meant to deal with the consequences of the errors, with the consequences of the occupational risks on the health and safety of the workers. No, this is focused on preventing them from happening from the outset, and that is usually important. It's not about giving a personal protective equipment to the worker and sending it to work as if the personal protective equipment will solve the problem. No, it's about avoiding the risks from the outset in order for the worker not even need a personal protective equipment. That's what we are talking about. It's and that is usually important.
Antonio, please choose English channel.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. You can hear me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So you can hear me now, because I lost the contact with the Zoom. So as I was saying, this new approach based on the prevention, you can see it on this draft law on aspects such as the consideration of the general principles of prevention on the organization by employers of the safety and health services, Article 15. You can also foresee it on the employer's obligations to assess occupational risks in Articles 14, 29, and 14 and 29 to 13. And one of the most important aspects of this draft law is that it's like in a war. You cannot fight your enemy if you don't know where he is, what is their capabilities. You have to know your enemy, where he is. First you have to know your enemy so that you can attack him. And the enemy on the workplace is occupational risk. So you have to assess the risks first and then define the best strategy to deal with them. And that's what this law proposes. And these are the main aspects of this law. Besides those, there are other positive aspects that I will indicate. And one of those is that this draft law, foresees the main employer's obligations on OSH foreseen on international labor standards and on the European Union legal framework on OSH. For example, the obligation of the employer to organize and ensure the functioning of preventive and protective services of OSH and an OSH system. That is foreseen on Articles 15 and 16 of this draft law. The obligation of the employer to manage occupational risks, which is foreseen on Article 17. The provision of collective and personal protective equipment when the other preventive measures were not enough to reduce the occupational risk to an acceptable level, which is foreseen on Article 18. Ensure the workers' health surveillance, Article 20. Provision of training, information to workers, Articles 21 and 22. Ensure the consultation and the participation of the workers, Article 24. Planning and organizing first aid, firefighting, and the evacuation of workers is also foreseen on Article 23. More positive aspects of this draft law is the special protection that is afforded to special vulnerable groups of workers, as Yuri Kuzov already mentioned, pregnant workers, workers who have recently given birth or are breastfeeding on Article 29, workers under 18 years of age, Article 30, and workers with disabilities, Article 31. Other positive aspects has to do with the consideration of the aspects of the promotion and enforcement of legal provisions in order to ensure their application. Because as it happens in every part of the world, you can have the best laws on OSH, on labor, on a banking system, on financial system, wherever. But if you don't have a system of ensuring the compliance with the law, no one will comply with it. So that is very important that this law foresees also legal provisions in order to promote, to inform, and to enforce its legal provisions. They are foreseen on Articles 22 and 20 and 32 and 35 regarding labor inspection powers and activities, and also on the Article 36 regarding the liabilities for non-compliance. Well, but as the Chinese say, there is the yang and the yung, right? Yin yang. So this law has a very has a lot of positive aspects, but it also has a lot of things to improve in order to better align it with international and European labor standards on occupational safety and health. I will try to synthesize what are the most important aspects regarding some gaps and some things that should be reconsidered in this draft law in order to better align it to the international labor standards and to the European Union acquis. First of all, the structure of the draft law and its systematics. For example, Section 2 regarding the national and the national policy and system for OSH, which, by the way, I already said it is one of the most important aspects of this law. I think that parts of the Article 7, 9, and 11 to 14 that are focused on employers' obligations should be taken out of this section and put on the section concerning obligations of the employers. Why? Because this first section on the national policy and the system for OSH should deal only with the obligations of the state to ensure the function of the system of OSH. And the other ones that are focused on employers should be taken out from this area and put on the area regarding the obligations of the employers. Another aspect which is very important is the terms and definitions which are foreseen on Article 1. And here, I think that this draft law should not invent the wheel, because the wheel was invented a long time ago. And there are plenty of terms which are already stabilized in the lexicon of OSH, in a lot of international labor standards and EU directives, and the terms that are used, that should be used in Ukraine, should be exactly the same. So, in my opinion, there are several terms that should be changed in order to better align them with the international labor standards and the European Union acquis. We refer them and we define them on our 2 sets of recommendations. I just mentioned a few. There are more: workplace, workstation, occupational accident, occupational diseases, and night work. This is on Article 1. Other aspect that should also be carefully thought is the timing for adoption of the bylaws with the lists of risk factors that are needed to implement and to regulate several aspects of the draft law itself. For example, the lists of high-risk works, the list of high-risk work equipment, the risk factors for genetic heritage that are mentioned on the draft law, the risk factors for pregnant workers in their unborn child, and workers who recently have given birth or are breastfeeding. Also, the list of risk factors for minors. These are lists that are mentioned on Articles 12 to 14 and 29 to 30. And these lists are basically the lists that are referred to by articles that are on the draft law. It means that if this draft law is adopted before these lists are adopted too, or if they are not adopted at least at the same time, it means that this draft law, once it is a law, it will not be applicable because there is important regulations that are not in place. It is not, I would say, a negative aspect, but is something that we should keep in mind in order to avoid problems at the later stage, at the stage of application of the law. Also, another important aspect that should be improved is the need to provide, even when high-risk works or high-risk work equipment is authorized according with the provisions of the law, the employer shall remain, and that is not there, shall remain obliged to take all the necessary and adequate measures to minimize, as far as practically possible, the occupational risks and their impact on the safety and health of the workers. Even when the use of these high-risk equipment or the performance of high-risk works is authorized according to the law, the employer shall remain responsible for that and for minimizing those risks and their impact. This is foreseen on Articles 12 and 13, and they should really be improved. Other aspect is the fact that when is mentioned the obligation of the employer to assess risk, it is not usually accompanied by the clarification of how he should do it, and also what are the next steps that should be taken by the employer following the results of the risk assessment. Like, for example, inform workers on the results of the risk assessment, what are in concrete the preventive and protective measures that should be implemented following these results, health surveillance specific for the risks that were identified, and adapting working conditions, etc. These improvements should be inserted on Articles 14 and 29 to 30. Other aspects that should be improved is the fact that the organization and functioning of the preventive and protective OSH services is not flexible and prescribes the adoption of the same modality for all workplaces of the employer, instead of giving the flexibility that the international labor standards and the EU directive on OSH provides. Because according to the international labor standards and the EU acquis, the employer should be able to provide these preventive and protective services through one or more joint services for safety and health, or through one or more separated services, one for health, one for safety. And also, according to the international labor standards, the employer might adopt different modalities, internal or external, and joint or separate, for different workplaces of the same employer, depending on the number of workers of each workplace and of the nature of the occupational risks to which the workers are exposed to in each of the different workplaces. It means, because otherwise, imagine that this law will be published as it is. It means that if an employer has a construction company, he has probably dozens of workplaces. Each workplace would be a construction site, plus he has these services on the headquarters. Well, but the number of people that work in each construction site and the risks that they are exposed in the construction site are different from those that you can find on an office at the headquarters. But according to this law, probably the employer would have to have internal services of safety and internal services of OSH for all workplaces. Whereas, for example, on the office, you might have external services instead of internal. So it does not give the flexibility to the employer to choose the different modalities to adopt in each workplace, depending on the risks and on the number of workers employed in each workplace. That should be revised. Another aspect that should be revised is that the employer's obligations on first aid, firefighting, elimination of breakdowns, and the evacuation of the workers are mainly focused on the obligations of the employers once these events, these breakdowns occur, and requires emergency measures. Whereas, according to the international labor standards and the EU acquis, employers should also ensure not only when these situations happen, but they should implement measures to ensure the preparedness to deal with such events if they occur, like setting up and training the workers that will be responsible for implementing these measures, to provide the means necessary to implement these measures, etc. This is foreseen on Article 26. And we are almost finalizing. So we are almost finalizing. Other aspects to improve include the employer's obligation to subordinate all his or her actions to OSH, the need to ensure that that the obligations to subordinate the actions on OSH to the strict observance of the hierarchical and sequential general principles of prevention was a bit neglected on this draft law, because with the exception of the obligation to organize OSH services in Article 15, no other employer obligation is subject to the strict observation of the general principles of prevention, which is not in line with Article 6.2 of the directive, of the EU OSH Framework Directive. Also, employers' obligation to formulate and implement an overall plan for the prevention of occupational risks is absent from this draft law, and in particular from Article 26 that is focused on employers' obligation. There should be an obligation, there should be there the obligation of the employer to formulate and implement an overall prevention policy, an overall prevention plan for OSH. Moreover, the draft law provisions regarding labor inspectors' powers on Article 33 are not in conformity with ILO Conventions 81 and 129. I repeat, the legal provisions that are foreseen on Article 33 of this draft law on the powers of labor inspectors are not in conformity with ILO Conventions 81 and 129 because they limited the powers of labor inspectors to perform inspection visits at any hour of the day or night without prior notice and without exceptions. And on this draft law, there is don't foresee at night, and also there is an exception that is only when it's necessary to ensure the safety and health of the workers or something like that, which does not make sense, because to know that they have to do the inspection visit first. So, and again, this law should be aligned with ILO Conventions 81 and 129. Finally, regarding the employer's liability for the violation of the legislation on OSH, which is foreseen on Article 36, it seems not to be in conformity with the international and EU best practices and with Article 9.2 of ILO Convention 155 that states that the enforcement system shall provide for adequate penalties for violations of the laws and regulations. And this is not, this can be improved on this draft law, because we should first of all, the recommendations of the ILO to adjust the amount of the fines to the size of the employers were not introduced. Also, the recommendations of the ILO to consider other penalties, which are not financial penalties, but accessory sanctions, were not foreseen. And finally, the infractions that are listed, specifically listed on this Article 36, are not sufficiently differentiated by the amounts of the fines and by the level of the severity of the violations. And some important and very serious infractions are not specifically covered and isolated and differentiated, and some of them are left out even of this Article 36. And the bulk of the violations are only covered by a residual paragraph foreseeing fines in the amount of half of a minimum wage. So I would say that it should be improved, this Article 36, on the liabilities in order to better differentiate the fines in terms of the different levels of severity of the infractions. Also to introduce a mechanism of adjusting the amount of the fines to the size of the employers, either in terms of the number of employees, either in terms of the turnover of the business, and also to introduce accessory sanctions that are not monetary sanctions. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share our views. We will remain at your disposal to provide some additional inputs or clarifications if needed be. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very fruitful work day. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Antonio. I'm sorry that you were given such short period of time. But thank you for this nice speech. And I'm giving the floor to the representative of trade unions. And I am grateful for the opportunity to establish the dialogue between the state and trade unions and the workers. The speakers Hello, dear guests. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I'm as a representative of trade unions. I think we should be looking for the balance of interests. So the Article 21 of the EU agreement states that Ukraine should reach the aim of harmonizing the legislation with EU standards. The objectives are to improve labor safety and safe working environment, and also enhance the possibility of social partners and encouraging social dialogue. You know that adaptation of national legislation and harmonization with the EU legislation. So the first place goes to the framework directive, and we need to consider all the other international standards, namely European Social Charter and ILO Convention 187 and all the other conventions. But we also mustn't mustn't lower the level of protection envisaged by Ukrainian national legislation, which is the Code of Labor, the Constitution of Ukraine, and the Social Security legislation. Sorry, probably some technical difficulties. There is another person providing technical aspects of my speech. Can you see me? Yeah, okay. So one of the objectives stated is improvement of the occupational safety, health and safety. Trade unions can state a positive aspect of this draft law. Article 17 talks about professional risks management. Here we introduce the provision for employers' obligation on detecting dangerous risk assessment and taking measures to eliminate them. So we have a popular saying that all our standards and safety regulations are written in blood. But all these standards, they are based on studies and expert conclusions. ILO members introduced risk assessment. So danger elimination and risk assessment is the fastest and shortest way to improve occupational safety. So that's a progressive risk management method. So everyone, so you saw this pyramid, and you saw the number of accidents. All these figures are conclusions of experts. So to prevent occupational accidents and fatal occupational accidents, we need to detect potentially risky and dangerous conditions. And that is something I would like to emphasize on. possible dangerous actions of personnel. We can manage that, and if we do, we will drastically reduce number of fatal accidents. We also call upon looking at this problem holistically. There are some provisions of in the law. So risk prevention, financial losses, safety management system, responsibility, holistic approach, personal protecting equipment. All these aspects should be reflected in the draft law. That covers all aspects of occupational safety and health, and it's not the standing of trade union, but that's the standard best practice of EU employers and all other countries who are members of ILO. Systematic approach, Article 15, positive aspect of Article 15. Safety management system is envisaged on the level of the enterprise itself. But a negative aspect is the law doesn't envisage national management system, national level management system. If we don't have national management system, they say let the employer decide for himself and take care of those management systems. But that's the wrong attitude, because the employer's safety management systems should be supported by national safety management systems. So our suggestion is using provisions of Convention 187 and 155. And also we recommend to use and take into consideration, we recommend using Mr. Santos' recommendations and proposals. The draft law should adhere to ILO convention. So our trade unions suggest changing the wording of this article and include national management system. Here you can see the concepts of management system. So national policy should be updated. Then there should be accessible infrastructure and resources. Then national profile. And based on this, we need to adopt national programs, responsible agencies, social partnership, and so on. Also, a recommendation of ILO, national system includes different aspects, safety system and health, dissemination, support, legislation, inspection, and knowledge support service. Convention 187, on all the stages, it recommends to enhance social dialogue and social partnership on the national level for all the countries. They should introduce trilateral consulting agency on the national level, which has the responsibility to consider issues and react to them and provide comments and suggestions. You know Mr. Edward Deming, and he is the one who developed this management system. So there were studies, and after 50 years of studies, he said that if you nicely organize first 15% of any process and pay special attention to the initial stage, the remaining 85% will go smoothly without any additional efforts or expenses. And our suggestion is moving from the concept of reacting and improving. We should move to the concept of preventing and being proactive. And that is our sweet 85%, which can go smoothly if we pay proper attention to the initial 15%. I would also like to draw your attention to Article 14 of the draft law. The authorities on occupational safety and occupational safety and health. So the article doesn't clearly define who are these authorities and services who should check the occupational safety. And we also need to add the article on services for occupational hygiene. The project manager's recommendation are very relevant, and I believe they should be added. So there will be a list of services on occupational hygiene or health. And also there should be another draft law on occupational safety of workers. We also suggest using economic stimuli for the employers. We are only punishing the employers, but we are not giving them any incentives. And also, so I think we should consider suggestions of Mr. Santos that we should classify penalties and fines according to severity of violation. If it's a minor violation or serious violation, here we have the same size of penalty or fine, but it should be changed, I believe. Also, the size of the employer, that should be a small level or small size, medium size, and large size enterprises. For example, a large plant that violated some provisions, they may pay the same size of fine as a small cafeteria, which is not fair. That should be analyzed and improved. Definitely, the approach to punishing the employer should be the same equal for everyone, but we need to differentiate according to possibilities and potential of every employer. We also suggest using not only punishment but incentives to help employers take preventive measures for occupational safety. Unfortunately, we don't have any provisions in this law concerning economic incentives for employers. We can envisage that for workers too, and also when we calculate the insurance fee for every enterprise, it depends on the level and on functionality or efficiency of safety management system. So it should be like that, but unfortunately it doesn't work like that in Ukraine because we couldn't defend or we couldn't insist on this structure or on this principle of insurance fees calculations. We should also disseminate the information and raise awareness about the employers. So it would be beneficial for the employer to improve safety measures and preventive measures. European experts say that every euro invested in occupational safety creates the possibility or the potential of 2.2 euro. And value of companies that invest in human potential is 40% more or bigger. Why is it worth investing in occupational safety? Because so for the mechanism and the cost of occupational accident, losses and repairs and maintenance, that's why we should invest in prevention and not maintain and correct the results or the effects afterwards. When businesses undergo the procedure of certification, they are given financial perks and support from the state. They are given a tax exemption or some bonuses, and we should think about introducing similar aspects in Ukrainian legislation. So our suggestion is introducing article or a paragraph in the law, the incentives for workers, modernization of equipment, and introduction of international standards, depending on the level of occupational safety on the enterprise. Ukraine's obligation, according to EU agreement, one of the objectives is enhancing possibilities of social partners and supporting social dialogue. I believe that's where the trade unions come into play. Working on new law is searching for the balance between interests of all parties. We need to prevent potential social conflict. So interests of workers, interests of employers, and all the state agencies that should act as intermediaries or arbitraries between the first and the second, and they will be responsible for this balance. We should also consider some indicators which help us avoid financial risks, and trade union standing here is that state inspection agencies, we can help them to eliminate we can eliminate drawbacks of any safety management system and so on. So if we facilitate that, we will avoid social unrest and social disconcern. And I believe that we should adhere to the principles of social partnership, consider the interests of all the parties, and take responsibility for adhering to the or performing the responsibilities taken. So trilateral partnership, authorities, workers, and employers. So social dialogue is the key instrument of promotion of decent labor. And there is no sound and effective alternative to social dialogue. If we involve that and use it during any decision, we will not have any opposition to laws or provisions or regulations taken by authorities. If we don't use social dialogue, we may have some opposition or some unhappiness on part of the workers. That's why we should facilitate and disseminate this and promote these new provisions. So we should support and promote the existing positive aspects, and also promote cooperation on the level both of the enterprise and on the national level. Workers' participation is extremely important, and it's an element of safety management system in the organization. Compliance with the standards should be provided, and there should be some control and adherence of occupational environment. So technical reasons for occupational accidents are below 10%, probably a bit more in Ukraine, and the remaining 90% is behavioral or organizational problems. Then we have got some occupational accidents statistics. So the more dangerous activities the workers do, or the more dangerous actions, the more occupational accidents we will have. So workers should be incentivized to improve their behavior, but they should also be involved into the process of making decisions on occupational safety in the workplace. So if we minimize dangerous working conditions, twofold: general traumatism or injury will decrease not twofold, but by 2%. But if you decrease dangerous actions of the personnel, you will decrease trauma risk or injury by 48%. These figures clearly tell us that we need to involve workers' representatives on the level of enterprise and also on all other levels up to the national level. They should take part in occupational safety management and development. They should participate in different events, and they should have authority to control safety measures on the enterprise. So our proposals are that the following terms and provisions should be added into the draft law. So unfortunately, we didn't see any representatives of workers on the levels of enterprise. It's no good. So civil control and trade unions so we have technical inspections, technical authorities or technical inspection from trade unions on all the levels in all enterprises. So that's the common practice in Ukraine. These are experts, highly qualified experts, and their work hugely improves the level of occupational safety at the workplace. It also it's also good for early detection of risks on the level of enterprise and up to the national level. I'm very surprised that that the law doesn't include civil control authorities. So I believe that provision should be included into Article 41 and 42. The labor code envisages civil control, and the law on trade unions also envisages the civil control. 155 and 135 convention also envisages this public control. That's why please let's not have negative impact on social aspect of this law. I believe that these provisions should be included into the draft law, because unfortunately otherwise we will face this social outburst, because people are unhappy and they say that it's very dangerous not to have any public control in inspection authorities and not have the public involved into this process. So that's why we suggest to include these provisions into the law. So this article should be extended and amended, and everyone, so this wording should be understandable and it should raise no discrepancies. The law clearly defines who are workers' representatives, but the law says not trade unions, but the largest trade unions. And I believe this wording is not good enough. It's not accurate enough, because people will be fighting whose trade union are largest and so on. I'm very sorry, we are running out of time. Unfortunately, some speakers are still waiting to speak and they are running out of time too. So please, could you directive and the law, we cannot let the level of social protection of workers be lowered compared to the existing one. labor code and constitution defines proper level of social protection. I have also got a slide on strategic objectives of cooperation, but I will not dwell on that. I would like to say that the draft law is still very raw and is still very new, and some more work and efforts should be given to improve it and to add some useful and necessary provisions. My suggestion is to find a negotiation strategy to develop and work on this draft law further. So the strategy should be win-win, meaning that different agencies should consolidate their efforts, and all the parties should be not fighting or being competitors, but they should work together, which will be a win-win situation for all the participants, workers and employers. So teamwork, we gathered together, that's the start. We listen to one another, that's a progress, and working together is the success. Thank you for attention. Thank you. Thank you for your speech. I believe that everyone will be able to ask questions a bit later. I would like to give the floor to next speaker.
Good day, dear colleagues. Let me greet everyone, all the people gathered here and are taking care of the issue of occupational health and safety. I would like to say thank you to the organizers of this forum that managed to start this in this harsh time of coronavirus, because this discussion is very important. So in our agenda is acceptance of the new draft of the law. We do understand that this is actually the milestone that is taking care of the interest of everyone who lives in our country and those who provide the work to employees. The main question in this discussion of draft of law, not to repeat the history with the labor code, when some point that we couldn't get to agreement, was not able to perform and avoid the problem situations in future. By the Convention of 81, there is defined 3 main goals of the inspection of labor. This is the performance of control, technical advisory to all sides, and also tracking legislation articles that are not functioning in the proper way, just to make sure and inform the legislative bodies to improve the situation. So we do understand that we need to change the approaches in the system of health and safety. That's why we, from the end of 2016, started working in this direction in constant partnership of ILO, and to create the national profile for health and safety. And we conducted the audit of just to define the stage of problematics accumulated throughout this long period. Because the new edition heritaged the old, let's say, pros and cons. By means of this audit, we decided to define all these problems that encourage us to change the management system for occupational health and safety. And all these actions and all the bullet points we've defined that we consider to be mandatory to the system. We defined the main articles from different laws, and we need to say that the annex to this, to the basic format of the project of the new law, we already worked a big list of other laws that also will be considered accordingly at the final edition. So we are in the process from the very beginning, from the creation of the text, and also with the working groups. On the work group in Chernihiv, we had great discussions, and we had plenty of interesting ideas and proposals that in certain way were also included. So considering this, first of all, I would like to say in my speech about the achievements, but I do understand that there's a lack of time, and I need to say that a lot of things were already said by the speakers, because there's a lot of positive points, and considering things we hear as a feedback or the critical points, the only thing I would like to ask that we need to at least do the first step and then working on the improvement things we already worked on. Because as the practice shows, there's nothing perfect. There's always a room for improvement. That's why we need to make the first step and find the key points that everybody will be happy with. And then move on into the development and improvement. Thank you very much. Wish all of us a fruitful cooperation. Thank you, Mr. Igor, for a short but a very proper speech. Thank you for saving our time. And now I would like to say about the new speaker, Miss Olga Bogdanova. She's the chief of ESOSH and technical expert of IOSH, and also participant of ISSA. Good day, dear colleagues. Please confirm that you can hear me and you can see the PowerPoint. Do you see the PowerPoint? I'm very happy to see all of you. This is the final discussion, the final speech before the discussion, because a lot of things were said, but I found that it's very pleasant for me that I'm on the same page with you. So please excuse me if I'll repeat someone's words, but it's very good because we're thinking in the same direction. What is ESOSH and why we participate in this process of legislative process, which is new for us This is a discussion. This discussion is like brand new. It's a public union of specialists on health and safety. We united because there is a union like this in every country, and we consider our country to be well developed, and we need such a association. And we feel like our work is really needed. In our work, we separate our efforts and we work in groups, which gives us to be more focused on the issue. One of these strategic groups, like a task force, that is developing vital questions is the board of director of occupational and safety, health and safety of the big enterprises of Ukraine. We have constant discussions throughout a long period during our meetings, and they were all dedicated to this new draft of law. What is good, what can be improved, and by this means, I'm speaking not only about my point, but also my colleagues, those who input a lot of efforts. And I will be very glad if we could be heard. We have a group in legislative initiatives that work with the government. We have a very active position in a lot of questions. This is our group in tracking changes in legislation. Everything that is related to promotion of health and safety. We have, like you see, marathons, we have support to the students. So we work not only in the professional field, but also implement this with people, because people are let's say, they receive that support. They should also take care and they should participate and understand how important it is. Our main goal is the development of the competence, and we don't want to invade anything new in the world. We just took on board the best practices in the world. We do understand that the competence is increasing with time, and there are certain levels of development. This is one of our key tasks. We have a coordination board that consists of the specialists well known all over the world. That's why it's easy for us to operate, because we can take and understand the foreign experience. And for us, it's good to know that we are moving in the right way. Why it is important? Why Ukraine needs this? Why we need to take someone's experience? I have a simple answer to that question. The thing is that the main indicator is results, and results are, we can gain, we can see that the trauma result, health and safety, what's their level. And you do understand that in Ukraine at this time, again, at this time, we don't have great results, to impress someone globally. But anyway, we think that we need to decrease the traumas, make our indicators more transparent. And that is why we learn from European countries because they know how to decrease the, let's say, lethal traumas and bad injuries. And in our case, we work on transparency because people need to know that they don't need to hide traumas. And this is an indicator. So first, this is a preamp, short introduction, that we have a serious position, why we were taking part in this legislative process. And again, fairly, I would like to say thank you to all the people that involved us into this, because last year it wasn't possible. And our position in the framework of this new law is very positive, and we expect from this law a great changes. And why? First of all, it's health and safety. We finally using the right words for certain things. Assessment of risks as the instrument for more capabilities. We heard about this, that the big companies are going to do this risk assessment and using this as an instrument. But we have to understand that this instrument is for everyone, absolutely, to all the people, all the employees. So it's important to make it more accessible. Manage risk management with a certain hierarchy. And we need to understand that it's a lot of work to be done to avoid the risks. But now we have this. It was not included in the previous laws. So potentially hazardous incidents also should be taken into consideration. Audit as the way for improvement, increasing, and also previously increasing the competency. So the audit is the instrument, as an instrument, is very important because it gives the possibility to understand where are you, what are you standing on, and where to move on. Protection of setting categories of the employees. As a mother of 3 children, it's very important to understand that the genetical heritage should be, taken care of. Consultancy and advisory and involvement of employees. It's also important because the government should also be in a dialogue with the employer and the government. It was not included previously, but now it's in the text. And responsibility of expert organizations. We never had this before. I cannot say that it's perfect and it's ready for improvement, but it's also will bring some more changes into civic code. So the project goes strictly hand in hand with the European standard. Also, Antonio, Ministry of Economy, and the other bodies, thank you again for starting this process. There are certain tasks for improvement that should be taken. There's nothing perfect, as we said, but there's something to work on and to improve. First thing we would like to propose, we do understand that without a certain control, because no such system in Ukraine. But considering that there's a certain level of responsibility from the employer in Europe, but which still to make our system more effective, more efficient. It needs to be globally digitalized. We need to break down all the, let's say, obstacles. If everything will be happening in the digital way, electronic declaration with a certain information that is actually required, and everyone will know where the service system is, how to perform it properly. And it's good for all the government agencies and bodies because they will know where the actual things are happening. So that's the instrument for everyone to say, yes, the system works. Yes, we can improve it. So the other thing is control of study, training, and competence. It's also related to things like we do understand that the person comes in and says he's an expert. I can see he knows things. But sometimes people do not have training, do not have certificates in the evening, for example, but in the morning they already have it. And I do understand that something's wrong. That's from my own experience. So the proper training and the competency, that's vital. That should be a register of the people trained. There is some certain practice in the world. There's nothing new to be invented, but you know, there is a need for that. And also informing about the incidents. British system radar, you just insert the information, the data, and that's it. It's an instrument for us to decrease the amount of incidents, and it gives the online picture of our indicators all over Ukraine. And also registration of the equipment. It's still something to work on because, you know, for big enterprises, it's very hard because they have plenty of equipment and you need to register everything like a chainsaw. We still don't know how it's going to work on. So all these questions these points should be improved. So insurance system also requires clear mechanisms because in our stage, it's still a little bit blurred. We do not understand how it's going to operate, but we all know that in Europe, all this learners is considered with the costs, is related to the costs. Because the person says, I have a minor trauma, and they apply for the compensation and without any spare bureaucracy, a person receives the funds and the government and the enterprise is happy because they don't waste time. We still do not use all the possibilities and the capabilities of the insurance system. And also about the penalties, responsibilities and penalties. We have to work on this more because we want for we want the employer to work fairly, transparently, because we don't want anyone to hide anything or avoid responsibility. We still be working on also transparency for access of inspectors to the enterprise, because the inspector has the right to check everything. Because the inspector should check everything. For example, I can see outside my window, someone's building something, constructing a church, for example, and employees, they don't have the personal protection equipment. And someone needs to check it, because sometimes the construction site can work, should work with the proper documentation. Sometimes they don't have the permits. And so it's still to be worked on, because it's unclear. But we need to make it more transparent and easier to understand. So management of safety of subcontractors. You all know that business requires subcontracting. And sometimes people consider, okay, all the, let's say, high risk jobs and works, I'll give to my subcontractor. But in the European legislation, all the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the main contractor, not the subcontractor. And we need to understand that the main contractor, there is a way, for example, to interfere into the work of the subcontractor in case of any hazard. So it's still unclear, it's still something to work on. So the key point to this new legislation changes, I still don't have the answers. What are our expectations? We want to decrease the trauma and to make it more clear and transparent. So we have to understand what are our expectations and what steps we should take to meet it. We have to understand if the penalties are really huge, for example, for private entrepreneurs, it will definitely impact on their business. So we need to consider resultiveness. And that's the key to the right decisions. This is based on our considerations is the key, based on the KPI and the offers to this legislation act. So also we as an active people, we united and we are working on, we are ready, we won't be standing aside, we will be actively participating. We have people who are really ready to dedicate their capital. First thing, we are introducing and we would like you to participate all national special discussion on the draft of law. We do understand that this group for discussion, all national discussion is vital, and we need to conduct this. And I think that in the nearest future for the specialists, we will open this platform, not only on the occupational health and safety, but also the medical workers. Also, we have International Association of Labor Inspection. Helmut Ines, he gave me a tip on that. And it's 100 countries are included into this association, and they have plenty of information like training, and also they have a new developments for the inspection methods. And I also wish for our services to participate and become the members of this association, because it's something where you can enrich your knowledge. And they have training programs for increasing the competency. We have the records of webinars, and all our organizations have them. European agencies, they work more in English, but if we separate the tasks, because we have 1,200 participants, we can split it into working groups, and we will have plenty of materials. So we can make a lot of with the risk assessment and make these materials more accessible. So reviewing all the sub-law normative acts. And we are ready to participate in all these reviews, and all this job also can be splitted into groups, and we can manage this. Consideration of specific big and small enterprises. So we need to understand that we need to ask ourselves a question: have we included everything, all the interests? And such an analysis should be taken. On one hand, we can make discussion and explanations to the employees and employers. And also develop conceptual joint position and perform this job. Life as the key value. That's something we all share. Thank you for attention, and thank you for start working in this direction. Thank you, Olga, for your speech. It's very motivating. And I would like to announce a panel discussion. We are a little bit cut on time, but we will slightly move to the panel discussion. So the introduction word I would like to take, and then we will switch to the chat and the questions. Yuri, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me well. I would like to stick to our schedule. We still have half an hour. And I'm very thankful. I would be even more happy if you could have a form of certain editions. Because we would like to discuss the norm, but not the idea. We have 450 people, for example, we're discussing the idea, but we need to understand that how we're going to vote. And I would like to discuss the question from Vitaly Yeremenko. He delegated into chat. He wants to know the positive motivation for the employer. And the example, the taxes. For example, if the taxes will be decreased for the employers that create safe occupational environment and the proper equipment for protection. And one more thing from Tatiana Hurun, from mechanism of positive stimulation, not only negative stimulation, because she started her speech with, they were surprised that there is a negative motivation of, I mean, financial demotivation. And in this frame, I'm probably speaking about my point of view, but I think it's going to be very acceptable, considering that the employer is eager to. These are norms from European Union, so employers should perform all the actions to provide safety, and it's one of his key tasks, also in the list with the payrolls, salaries, and so his task is to create a safe environment. And I think it's unclear why performing these function and these keys as the tasks in front of the employer has to have additional motivation. So I'll give a comparison on that. So if you have a salary on time, your taxes can be decreased. Or I'll switch to the criminal field. If you killed a person, okay, as the government, I'll give you some money because you're doing good. You don't hit anyone on the street. So considering this, I think implementing some motivation system to the employers on this stage, I mean, on the nowadays stage. So implementing this bonus system for employers that provide a certain level of safety and zero trauma. For example, where have I been? At the Philip Morris factory. 375 days without trauma, without incident. And it's positive. It's a good practice. When you come to work and one of the motivation to be here, to stand on your, to make everything possible for this zero incidents as the employee, I mean, in this case. And we need to define some additional mechanisms to encourage the employer to stick to this zero trauma system. And my answer to this is I don't see any, let's say, possibilities for that. I'll switch to a different field to answer this. I mean, the bonus systems. Insurance system, when the insurance systems, the old one was separated from the general one, I mean, the occupational health and safety, and it was personalized. And there was the chance to rebalance the fees of the employers who are not behaving good, and decreasing the fees for the other part, the majority, let's say, of employers that provide good conditions and they don't have, in fact, the incidents. It doesn't mean that potentially it cannot happen there, but in this system, the mechanism was discussed of the bonus system that should impact on the fees for social insurance. But in nowadays system of social insurance and the general fee and related to the system of insurance, but it doesn't mean that we didn't have enough courage to break this system and to separate from this system the national system of insurance. But it would be even more hard to do this in the law. But I do not exclude that in future, especially considering that
points brought up from the system of insurance. So modernize this system, improve it, and make it go back to the system bonus malus, but not in these law, because putting the functions of reorganization of the social insurance system, it would be too hard, because we do understand the amount of the questions and the comments on that. It's not related to all of it. We will have plenty of, let's say, sub legislative norms and standards to that law and changes. So we need to make it well balanced for it to have a good perspective to function and to be adopted by the parliament. So as for me, including this into that draft of law will make it even more complex. In future, we can develop this system, but not on this stage. Thank you for the questions. And if there are any other questions, I'm ready to answer. Mr. Yuri, maybe we will add questions later, because we are working on them with Alexandra, but yes, we don't want to waste time. There are a couple of questions. First one is from Mr. Sergey. There was no question. He has two questions. What is responsibility of the employer for breaching the rules of health and safety? What do you foresee in this legislation act? And the second question, how the insurance will look like. So what companies will be involved into this insurance process? How do you see that? Thank you, Sergey. And the answer to the first question, so as the rules of health and safety, this law does not foresee. It's one of the components of changes when the government will step off from a certain direct regulation of the health and safety organization of work, no matter how you call them. And we will go step into the frame of functioning of the system of safe and health, but the certain rules should be developed by the employer. So it doesn't matter what the government tells every employer. It's very important how the employer will develop his own rules, perform the training, and will inform his employees about these rules and standards to avoid traumas. And he will explain why not following the standards, what does it cost, what traumas. That's the task, but not to control how the employer done his job, like for example painted his fence. So about the health and safety rules, there's no such responsibility for that, because it's not included as a method of regulation. I would offer Article 36 to look into, because probably there can be answers already, but the project of this law, it foresees the responsibility calculated, but some certain amount of cost by not sticking to some certain obligations for organization of the system of healthy for the employees. For example, if you use the equipment with a high risk of usage without registration So it's a breach of law because you haven't registered it, you haven't informed your, for example, your employees on a health and safety. You are getting penalties for both. So there are plenty of examples for that. So this list of breaching of rules where you get a penalty, considering that the functions is the system of safety, it's all foreseen in Article 36. I'm ready to comment about the amounts and the functions. And thank you, Mr. Sergey, and I'm ready for the other question. So what's the period of going to the for transformation? Transition period. So yes, in the law, it said that 1 year transition period. Again, same thing that Antonio said, that we need to have a certain period of time because certain, let's say, government agencies, starting from the Cabinet of Ministers and ministries, they've developed some laws that are mandatory for this law to be implemented. That's why we have this transition period, 1 year. Maybe it can be a little bit longer, and it's also a point for discussion. But for in our case, it's 1 year during which a cabinet of ministers should prepare the drafts for the normative acts, legislative normative acts, and they will start be valid at the same time with the law. And that's the period of time that you can get informed with all the information required for that and foresee the functions of the employer included. And this time frame will give a chance to adopt to your system, to the rules of new law. Mr. Yuri, we also have one question to you about the article number 13, a little bit blurred. Special conditions for usage of the equipment. You've said that you need to give some recommendations, but how do you think? Are you going to still work on that? Do you have some improvements for that article? If I would have any of them, you could read them in article number 13. But now you're talking about the working equipment. Yes, I'm talking about working equipment. So what actually happened in the project? What do we offer? You know, Article 21 requires everyone, according to the order of Cabinet of Ministers, you need to receive the permission for usage of the equipment and doing certain works. So we consider that the equipment there is, for example, packed or is in the corner, it's not sold, so it's not the source of hazard. It becomes after it's sold and it starts operating. So we marked this in Article 12. So we mark the control that for certain works and usage of certain equipment, you need to receive permission. And in Article 12, we acknowledge that you need to receive the permission for starting works. And about the equipment, we've put this in a separate article. Control on the, let's say, presence of certain equipment will be performed by the registry of the equipment, high risk we foresee that this is going to be a very light mechanism of electronic monitoring system for this equipment, because we don't want to put this on the shoulder of employer. It's an additional thing. And we partially keep the government control on the present equipment, because we do understand if the employer has a registered equipment, it can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be a source of the potential threats. So as per now, we offer this kind of way of conditions for usage this, but maybe someone sees the other mechanism, maybe more rough. We are ready for the discussion, but we consider that this mechanism should exist. So, question about the Article 12. In the question about the method of providing spending certain costs by the employer for the measures related to health and safety, it has a very, let's say, rough discussion, but concerning the mentality and the employers and the practice, form of practice in the law, things should be defined. So this is the amount, no less than this, that the employer should spend on health and safety during work. But on the other hand, we said, like, we don't have to limit the employer and put some indicator in this law. There is no minimum that the employer should spend for precaution measures. But we say that the employer should spend as much as he needs, and we do not limit this amount. Because someone will say, okay, I've spent that much for these measures, and you try to avoid the taxes. That's why we reflected this in this way. So we've inputted that the employer should spend as much as he considered to be necessary for this purposes, and we do not limit him. Mr. Yuri, we have two interesting questions. We wanted to end it up, but two questions, very important, and we wanted to speak about this. So one from Bohovik, we would like to define what does it mean? Financing of, let's say, health and safety, does it have to be in some certain amount? And what do you say about the risks? First of all, I would like to put my comment, it's all about everything and about nothing, because, you know, it's related to everything, but it doesn't gives the understanding what. So the employer has the obligations to do as much as he can for 0 deaths, 0 incidents, and everything to be performed properly, health and safely. So I don't care how much money he has to spend for this. And I don't care about how he's gonna spend this money. Will he, for example, make a great technological improvement for the equipment? and it will cost him 3 annual budgets, or he will, for example, provide the bullet analysis in the problem and defines the problematics, and it gives him a chance to achieve same results. I don't care. This is something to be chosen by the employer. We need to create in this law all the necessary conditions for him to be able to perform everything on his own and in the proper way. And the second question, can you please ask him? So risk assessment. So the methodologics of the risk assessment, we also had this discussion in the working group. So the methods are not something secret or something that needs a regulation on the level of new law. So that is why in the law we have a point included that the central government bodies and Ministry of Economics, they should define the methodological recommendations for the procedures to be able to perform the risk management, risk assessment. It will be based on the practices that already exist. It will not exclude the possibility to use the other methods by the employer, but it's just to give them the base. For example, to those who are not familiar with that, on the small ones that cannot afford to hire experts. So the minimum recommendations also will be given by the central government body, I mean, Ministry of Economy in this case. Thank you, Mr. Yuri, for your replies. Together with Sergey, we will gonna work on the questions and we're gonna ask them later. I will ask the participants to go on. And after that, we will have time. This block of questions will also add. Thank you all. I'm also at work. If I won't be able to answer all your questions, so I'll be glad if you can give me a list of questions, because it's not just a question. It's something to consider, you know. And me together with the team, we will definitely work on these questions and we will try to, you know, take it on board and include it. Thank you all. Thank you for this dialogue.
Thank you for this dialogue. Let's continue our work. And I do hope we will manage to cover all the questions that our participants have. We will not take any break. We will not make pauses. We will start the second panel, which is risk-oriented approach in enterprises operation. And next topic is first aid. And I give the floor to our next speaker, Tamara Bilko. So I can hear you. Can you see my presentation? Yeah, you can see it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to meet each of you in this platform. Definitely, we needed to give much time to discussing the draft law on occupational safety at work. But now I'm starting the first aid topic, and I would like to make a quote. The entire life is risk management and not risk elimination. Unfortunately, it's the reality in Ukraine. Definitely, we need to assess occupational risks, and we need to assess the severity of its effect. We need to make calculations of assessment of risks, and this is alignment with European standards, directives, and occupational regulations. Our colleagues mentioned today that the draft law in question is the absolutely new law, and we do hope that after we finalize all the questions and finish with all the comments and recommendations, this law will be passed, and it will start working and help functioning of OHS in Ukrainian enterprises. Why did I mention this question? Because the first aspect of this law, so one of the article mentions first aid and evacuation of workers in case of accidents. In the section of health, safety, occupational safety and health of workers. I would like to draw your attention to the definition of professional risk and what is danger. Danger is potential characteristics of the object or activity which can cause damage to health or life of a worker, and professional risk is the possibility of damage to health as a result of influence of dangerous professional factors, taking into consideration severity of the effects of this influence. When we discuss the prevention measures, there's the instruments which give us the possibility to reduce the risks of this influence. When the workers comes to work, and up till the moment he leaves and goes home, his health or condition can deteriorate. That can be trauma, loss of consciousness, heart attack, some disease, any of these. All of this can result in loss of health or even loss of life at occupational site, at production site. How can we make ourselves ready to this accident, and what is the algorithm of reaction to such incidents, and how can we reduce that, reducing the severity? The way out is to train and teach our workers to provide first aid and also to provide medical kits to make this aid possible. Draft law, section 3, organization of health and safety of workers. So I would like to draw your attention to this article. In case of an accident happening at production site, the employer must ensure a provision of first aid. This means that we are speaking about the employer who is obliged to do the following. He must appoint responsible people who should be trained and who should get qualification in first aid as envisaged by law. It says here that the number of responsible workers should be defined by the employer depending on the size of the enterprise and number of personnel. One of the best training centers which provide first aid training, I involved them into discussion of this article, and I wanted to listen to their proposals on improving this article. So our suggestion was to remove the definition of number of responsible workers and include the definition of no less than 20% of the general number of personnel. This is an important aspect because the more workers know how to provide first aid, the higher are the chances that the casualty or the person who was injured will have someone by his side to provide first aid. That is the reduction of severity of accident effects. I will give you the example from practical experience. A cleaning lady was using a detergent, and she was adding some water to that, and she splashed the detergent into her eyes. Fortunately, there was another worker nearby who knew how to provide first aid, and she rinsed the affected eye, and in this way the accident was prevented. The cleaning specialist preserved her health, and that happened due to the fact that other workers were trained in first aid, which helped reduce the effects of the accident or possible accident. Another thing I would like to draw your attention to is that the employer should instruct workers how to act during accidents. Definitely these instructions or guidelines should correspond or align with the requirements of European legislation. The positive aspect of this article is that the safety is above all. What is envisaged is the possibility for the workers to stop their operation and move to another room to remove or eliminate the results of effects of accident. So the employer will designate responsible workers who will take the first aid training in compliance with legislation. The law doesn't say which organizations are authorized to deliver these courses. So there should be the organizations who have large experience and who have certifications, and also with instructors who have proper medical training and experience. First aid kit. All workplaces should have one, and the contents of those medical kits should be proper. So what should we do to reduce the severity of the accident? First of all, to train the workers and to train them, to teach them to provide first aid. The legislation gives us this possibility, and this provision, this requirement is reflected in the law and in the labor code. The second aspect or precondition to reduce the severity is having medical or first aid kits in every section, department, office, or production site. And these all the workers need to know how to use those first aid kits, and the contents of the first aid kit depends on the specific aspects of production and occupational hazards and possible risks which are there. I did my best to make my speech short. Thank you for attention. So your speech was really brief, but really nice and very effective. I now give the floor to the next speaker. Do we have one? Yeah, so we can hear him. Can you hear me? Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I have got the presentation in Ukrainian and I will speak Russian. The previous speaker, you can say she started my speech and I would like to continue. What is important, we hope for something when we make emergency call, and that is something I would like to speak about. So the name of my presentation is Emergency Call, What Do We Hope For? First of all, I would like to say that our center's employees are trainers and instructors, people who are experienced in first aid, and they have practical experience in emergency services, and we have certification from the Center of Catastrophes and all international certifications as well. You can see the pictures that illustrate our training, and we illustrate our motto that the knowledge saves life. We train workers, and we also train medical workers of enterprises. And also we do stress tests, which are a part of our training, which is like practical training. We adhere to all safety measures. We have long-time cooperation with enterprises and companies. We have some clients which we work with since 2008, and we are working in practical production sites, and we take part in all their safety measures and developing of their safety regulations. We instruct them how to place first aid kits, because sometimes it happens that we have first aid kit in a box which is inside a wardrobe somewhere locked under key. So it shouldn't be like that. All the first aid kits should be not only present and available, but placed in proper places. Then we take part in organizing survival chain at the enterprise. This means that not only time is important, but also all links of the chain are important. They need to call for, make an emergency call and call ambulance, but before that, the first aid should also work nicely and smoothly. We do hope. We have a medical worker at an enterprise, and we think he is the savior, and we put all the responsibility on him, but it's not, it's wrong, because the medical worker is not the one responsible for everything. There's the entire survival chain that is. Regulatory base is the law of Ukraine on emergency medical aid. So when we make an emergency call, that's just the ambulance that come in, like general purpose ambulance. So these laws and ambulance call are important, but what is also important is the collective agreement with the training center. Emergency call. You're calling an ambulance and you're saying, please come, everyone is dying. But what is very important is to define the criteria of emergency aid and emergency rescue and just medical assistance. So it's like a triage and the most severe injuries that are possible, which call for emergency rescue, which is massive bleeding, massive bleeding, stop of breathing, stop of heart, vomiting, and there should be some responsible person who takes care of, should take care of the casualty from the moment of calling for ambulance and the ambulance arriving at the address. I say the address, not the injured person. So you should remember that you should add some time. You should add some time from the moment of ambulance arriving at the gate of the enterprise, and then sometime it's required to take the ambulance through all the checkpoints and to the workshop and to the building where the injured person is. Ambulance shouldn't arrive to non-emergency calls, which is sudden raise of temperature. So that is the law that says that ambulance will not come when a person has a headache or is dizzy or some chronic disease. These are the cases which don't require, which don't call for ambulance arrival and emergency medical aid. In this way, in this case, the injured person will need to go to the doctor, to hospital or to clinic, but not using ambulance and emergency call. Some time ago, the law of Ukraine envisaged coming of ambulance to all those listed calls, but now they are deemed not that important. That's why the ambulance will come to emergency call. So the dispatcher will qualify each call as emergency one or non-emergency one. When do we lose time and what things are delaying the arrival of assistance? First of all, the address of enterprise. Unfortunately, ambulances are not equipped with GPS navigators. Usually that is the driver who needs to drive to the destination. And sometimes they are using Google Maps to arrive to your enterprise, but the Google Maps will show your enterprise as a huge gray spot. There are like 5 entrances and 6 checkpoints, and the dispatcher should get exact directions where to come and how to come. The dispatchers usually say, please let the caller call me back and give me exact directions where to direct the ambulance. Because sometimes the security of the enterprise are people who are different from the workers or from the enterprise authorities. Sometimes the security guards even don't know that the ambulance has been called, and then they will not let the ambulance in, which means that the time is lost before the medical assistance is given to the casualty. Then personal protective equipment for medical workers. Sometimes the enterprise has regulations for people getting into the premises wearing helmets, and sometimes the ambulance will have no helmets or no goggles or no other protective equipment. So probably if you call the ambulance, you can send a person carrying personal protecting equipment to pass that to the ambulance workers. I remind you that your enterprise can be a huge thing, and sometimes it makes sense to send a guide to guide the ambulance to the proper premises where the injured person is. Another thing is the age and fitness of ambulance workers. For example, there can be a tiny lady and an older man or a young boy, and it's not always that they are fit enough to take care of the injured person and to provide proper assistance. So the question was, not the question, but the statistics is that the average age of medical workers is 45 years old. Sometimes a worker who feels bad weighs 150 kilos, but he needs to be carried to the ambulance, which means that preferably you must provide personnel to carry the injured person. Incident place of accident, place safety. When accident happens, the requirement to the medical assistance ambulance workers is, so if there is some danger to the life or well-being of medical personnel, they will call for emergency service, and the medic is not obliged to enter. They have the right to refrain from entering the premises if there is some danger to his health and life. For example, a crane working, posing the danger of falling, and so on. So that's the safety of the place of accident. Another thing that I wanted to mention was the regulatory base, and here you can see the collective agreement, and it says that the ambulance worker should adhere to the existing safety regulation, which is effective at the enterprise, which means that the ambulance worker should work basing on the same safety regulations. He is not an emergency rescue or military man or police worker. He goes by the same safety regulations as all the other workers of the enterprise do. Sometimes the workers would tell the ambulance worker, don't be afraid, we are walking here all the time and it will never fall, but the ambulance worker shouldn't take that. Then evacuation of the casualty. So there are two types of evacuation. Emergency evacuation when the danger is still there, and planned evacuation using special equipment. Don't forget that with emergency evacuation, sometimes you can deteriorate the injuries of the casualty. With the planned evacuation, it takes place only with the participation of medical worker, which can be either the enterprise's medical worker or the ambulance worker. Here you have equipment equipment used for evacuation with spine injury. That can be some kind of long board or carrying devices, and the enterprise should would do good to purchase all this equipment in advance, because when emergency rescue comes, they may have this equipment, but they may not, or they may have equipment of bad quality, some stretchers or anything which will be useful while helping the person with the spine injury. For instance, when the worker fell down from some scaffold and we started moving him without proper equipment, we will deteriorate his injury. Everyone knows this procedure number 337, investigation and registration of accidents at the production site. So we call, make emergency call, and the dispatcher will notify the police authorities. They will report the place, address of the accident, name of the enterprise, and possible suspected injuries. What Tamara Alexandrovna mentioned, and I will repeat it once again, when you called the ambulance, this doesn't stop your responsibilities. Your responsibilities continue, and you should organize the preparation of medical assistance, and you should also provide first aid, even if this first aid is providing just psychological aid, asking the casualty not to move and not to deteriorate his condition. So first aid can be of different type, and there is the order of the Ministry of Health number 398 on the procedure of providing first aid to workers. And there is another decree number 346 on improving the training of on improving qualification of personnel and training them to provide first aid, people without medical education. Unfortunately, medical education is not a master key. There are different people with different knowledge, and even if you went through medical school, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't adhere to all the acting regulations. Conclusions. First of all, you need to develop proper algorithm of cooperation with the emergency services. Who is the one who should call, who should make emergency call? Is it the head of the enterprise, or is it the security guard? Who is this responsible person? And he should be designated or appointed before the accident happens. Then you should take care of the safety of the medical worker at the place of the at the scene of the accident. Don't forget that you should give the first aid to the injured person, because it's the first chance for him to survive, and then medical help arrives. But the first aid should be given by person who knows how to do that. if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. And also we will have recording and the video of this discussion. So please write, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you for giving us knowledge which saves life. And thank you for your speech and for being present. I give a floor to Andrei Alexandrian, Infection Safety of Enterprises. You can see me and you can hear me, right? Hello, my name is Andrei Alexandrian. I am epidemiologist, and I will discuss organization of infection safety at enterprise. This year we had the experience so for infectious safety, there are different objects, either a large enterprise with a big management structure or a large medical establishment. I would like to start with saying several words about our team. We were established in 2012, and we are a part of USAID project. We have got large experience of cooperation with international organizations, with World Health Organization, with Project Hope, and different international partners. Unfortunately, we don't have many infection safety programs in Ukraine. That's why our team has lots of work to do. There are different members of our team. Usually they are medics, and also we have some lawyers, and we understand that very soon our work will be even more relevant, because we are in the process of coronavirus pandemic, and it doesn't end as soon as we would like to. Here you can see the list of projects implemented by our team during 2020. The most relevant topic is organization of infection safety of enterprise in terms of coronavirus pandemic. What I liked is what the previous speaker said, that everything mainly bases on risk assessment. And it's better to prevent than to solve. We need epidemiological training is very important, but unfortunately we still have no policy of doing that, and the legislation doesn't require infections training from enterprises. Unfortunately, lots of human resources and financial resources are spent without providing any results. So if we are dealing with infectious diseases prevention, we need to ask some easy questions, which are the same time difficult questions. What is the spread of disease? how COVID-19 is spread. So it's through droplets and through inhaling particles, and then contact way of spreading disease. I will not dwell upon this issue for too long because everyone read about different types and characteristics of coronavirus disease. What is important, the enterprise ventilation system should be working and taken care of. The day before yesterday, I saw the video, and you can see a screenshot on the slide. That is the video from a number of American institutions speaking about filtration and ventilation, which helps prevent and reduce the risk of coronavirus. Unfortunately, with the enterprises we visited, there were lots of dust particles, and there is a theory that dust particles take part in spreading of different infectious diseases.